Let me mess with it some more here. It's all the way up on both sides here. Ready when you are, Sydney.
Okay. So we're going to start on the workshop here on this concept for Escalon senior apartments. And again, I do want to stress this is just in concept form right now. This is our second community workshop today. I also did one in City Council 2 months ago. And so nothing here is set in stone. We are getting community feedback. We're getting ideas. We will be modifying this as we go along. So this is strictly give and take here. So it's not me speaking down to you. It's you coming back to me with your feedback, your ideas, and everything. So I'm actually going to skip ahead here on this just to make sure that everybody understands what site we're talking about. This is the city site over on Escalon Boulevard by Arthur. It's part of an 18-acre parcel that the city owns. We are discussing the approximately 8.79 acres that comprises 2 phases of potential senior development. Phase 1 is 80 units right there, closest to Escalon Boulevard. Phase 2 goes a little bit farther out, and again, it is buffered by a proposed public park, or a proposed extension of the public park to the existing public park. This will include a new road that basically extends Libby across the street all the way down to the end of phase 2. This could be financed potentially as either a 2-phase approach, 1 phase, a 2-phase, or if we find out that there's substantially more market demand than anticipated, we could actually do this as a complete single phase. Now I'll go back to the beginning. And this again is designed as a kind of a give and take. So as we go through, if you have questions, definitely feel free, raise your hand, interrupt me. We will take questions as we go along. Today's first session went, I think, like an hour 15, hour 30 minutes, and we just had an engagement going the whole time. So we are proposing on this site a single-story concept that we're actually utilizing in Chico right now. On Chico, we are buying an 11-acre site, and on 4 acres for the first phase, we're doing 80 units, and we're proposing to exactly take that same design here to Escalon. And we love it because it's 24 plexes, 4 units in each building. Each of the square footages for each unit is like 600, 650 square feet. We were talking actually about the Heritage Senior Development here in town, and our square footage is actually larger than those units and those developments. And here again, we have single story, everything's going to be ADA accessible, everybody's going to have a porch, plenty of open space. We'll have a nice community room with it. We anticipated having a central laundry facility. One of the feedback that we got earlier today is to have washer and dryers in each units. So again, we go back, take a look at the design, look at the financing, see if that's feasible. But that's one of the feedback that we got earlier today. And again, Christian Church Homes. So we've been in operation now for 61 years, 62 years actually. We have 4,000 plus units in 6 different states. We are long-term owners of our property. Everything that we've developed in our history, we still own, even including our original development back in 1961. The only thing we've sold is anything that we've bought from other people. One of those examples actually just recently happened. My former CEO bought a tower in Macon, Georgia, 200-unit tower, like $1 from a church. And after we owned and operated that, we realized why it was only $1, and we have since sold that to another developer who's going to fix it up and get vouchers and do a bunch of stuff to it, but we didn't want to take the financial risk on that, so we sold that property. But everything else, again, everything else that we've built in-house, we still own. Again, we've got about 50 plus communities in 6 different states. We are very well regarded in the states and in the communities we work at and we tend to build more than one property in those cities because of it. So for instance, in Visalia, we have 3 separate properties in Visalia. In the city of Reading, I'm currently financing our 4th in Reading, and that's going to be under construction next month. The Chico project will be our 2nd in Chico, and that's going to be under construction next year. We own multiple properties in Oakland and in several other communities in California. That's a great question. Yes, right now we are proposing them to be all 1-bedroom apartments. We don't do studios. One of the feedback that we got earlier today was perhaps have a percentage of 2 bedrooms. And that works sometimes, especially if the resident has a caregiver or a spouse and they want a 2nd bedroom for a little bit more space.
Question on the cities you mentioned.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because Visalia, when we first built there 40 years ago, was a much smaller town than it is right now. And so we're proposing, for instance, another site in Reedley right now, which is a small farming town in Fresno. We have worked in areas, in rural areas in Idaho, in Oklahoma City, rural parts of Oregon. So it's not our first rural development here. Go ahead. So that's a great question. So the development aspect of it is the math problem that we always try to solve from the standpoint of, we start with construction costs that are usually going to be more than market rate, because there's a lot of regulations that come with our developments in terms of environment, in terms of services, in terms of, you know, community rooms, things like that. So our development construction costs are generally more than market rate. Our rents, of course, now are far lower than market rate. So the math problem that we're trying to solve is that delta between the two. And so how we do that is by accessing a variety of sources: federal, state, sometimes county, sometimes local, getting city land like this, and then we kind of stack that all up together in order to create the financing for a project. We are a nonprofit, but we definitely like our profits too, so we will be taking a developer fee, and we run our operations in such a way that within our system, our 50+ units, we make about $2 to $3 million a year off of those developments, to go along with all the developer fees that we get through new construction and rehabs and such.
Market rate properties, or are they?
These are below market rate. Most of them subsidize affordable housing, yes.
By county or state?
County, state, feds, exactly.
Is it senior subsidized housing?
Senior only, that's all we do. That's all we've done for 61 years. We don't dabble in families. We did once in Houston, we'll never do that again. And so all we do is seniors. So that's a great question. So I've gotten feedback from our earlier session. So it depends on the funding source. We could go either 55 or we can go 62. And we've received feedback earlier today that 55 might be too young, that we should just stick to 62. So we'll see as we go along if that pans out at 62 or 55.
How many acres total?
So in our first phase, I believe we're working on 4 acres. So again, we're just taking that same 4-acre concept we had in Chico, plopping it right down there on the city site, and it's basically the same concept.
The total 8 acres?
The city site combined that we're looking at for the 2 phases is 8.7 acres. The first phase is just taking half of that 8.7 acres, and the 8.7 acres is part of a larger 18-acre site.
Bonds?
We could, and that is one of the potential financing sources of this deal, is because we're a nonprofit, we could actually finance it through what is called 501(c)(3) bonds, where we work with a finance company to essentially sell bonds to do new developments. It's usually done for construction and rehabs, but we are investigating on whether or not we can do that for new construction. So a site like this, if we decide to do both phases at once with 160 units, that could be one of the mechanisms we use to finance it. So that's a great question. And I'm not repeating the questions like you told me to do, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, if you could just, anytime someone asks a question, just make sure to say it into the mic. That way it gets caught on the mic.
Exactly. See, we're on the same wavelength there, so I got to repeat the questions, I'm sorry.
You mentioned funds from state and federal.
So the question is, if I accept state and federal financing, do I have to automatically accept Section 8? And so Section 8 is really a type of financing, and Section 8 is essentially a voucher. And the voucher can come in one of two ways. The federal government can give it to an individual and say, here is your voucher, now go find a landlord that will accept your voucher. The voucher can also be placed on a project by a local housing authority. And so that project, and then I'll give you an example, actually the Chico project that we have here has 25 project-based vouchers from Buttes County Housing Authority. So that 25 of those units are going to be set aside for project-based vouchers, meaning the voucher comes with the unit, not with the person. So somebody moves in, they get the voucher, they move out, they don't get to keep the voucher, whoever else moves in gets that voucher, and that contract runs for 20 years. So as a developer, we love Section 8 project-based vouchers because we get more subsidy from the government. Not that the resident pays more in rent, they pay the same 30% of their income, but we get a higher subsidy from the government for that. So we love the project-based vouchers. Now, when it comes to tenant-based vouchers, we have to follow fair housing laws like everyone else. And so, and we'll get into this more in terms of kind of how we can do a proposed lottery here. But if somebody comes in and they meet all the fair housing requirements, the fact that they have a Section 8 voucher is not a reason to deny them. And it's not because I'm accepting federal or state funding necessarily, it's because I have to follow application rules and fair housing laws and things like that. They do not have priority, and we're going to get into the lottery on this. Do you want me to just skip ahead to that, or? Sure. All right, let's skip ahead to that.
First, your research for this project, have you determined an approximate amount of underhoused or displaced seniors in Escalon that require this type of housing?
Yeah, so we've done some initial analysis. We've not done a full market study yet, but kind of looking around the closest 5, 10, 15 miles. Most of the senior affordable housing projects do have Section 8, they do have waiting lists in their properties. We've also heard anecdotal stories about mobile home parks in the area as well, losing residents because their rents are being increased. So I would tell you that from anecdotal evidence, we see that there is a demand. I'm commissioning a full market study this month to codify that to see actually how much that demand really is.
How many square feet are the units?
They are 615 square feet.
Are they meeting all the state standards, solar, all the other things required, fire?
Absolutely. So 2022 standards, we will have to have a certain amount of solar, and they will all be ADA accessible and available to adopt. So the current standard for 2022, I believe, is 50% ADA. We usually now just do 100% because it's easier.
Meters?
No, we generally do mass metering because we offer utility allowances to the residents, and so we usually do mass metering.
Same with the water?
Yeah.
All utilities are mass metered.
Yes. I don't want to have 80 meters in one area, so yeah.
Who's overboard, who's not?
We offer utility allowances and pay for certain parts of the utilities, so we can calculate, with a development like this, we're not really worried too much about the utilities. So I will go forward now, skip all this. Let's look at what a potential lottery can look like. And so I've done something similar like this in several cities. Yes?
Know what your funding is. I guess a lot of this is dependent upon.
No, you're absolutely correct. And so the question is, do we know our funding sources? I know all of my potential sources, and so part of the community engagement, part of working with the city is trying to nail down certain requirements, certain costs and stuff. Once I have that, once I kind of have an idea of the number of units, then I will look at all the different sources and then start planning the variety of paths that we use. If it turns out that we're doing a lot of units, then that pretty much takes 9% tax credits off the board, and we're looking at either a 4% bond project or a 501(c)(3) bond project. If it becomes a 60 to 80 unit project, then we'll be looking at potentially 9% tax credits, be looking potentially at HUD, we could be potentially looking at a veterans project. We generally, CCH we do not do permanent supportive housing homeless projects because it's just not our history and it's not our expertise. So we generally stay with just independent living for seniors with maybe set-asides for either veterans or for developmentally disabled or physically disabled seniors. Yeah, I always advise something different from what I've used in the past, and the example I'm going to give is what San Francisco has done, which is a variation of that. So the jurisdiction basically comes up with what its preferences are, and in this case, from what I've heard earlier today and when I was here previously, live and work in Escalon is your top priority. Is that correct? Am I stating that correctly? So live and work in Escalon, and what I've heard earlier today is not only just live and work in Escalon, but maybe live and work within a certain square miles, because a lot of people may have left town, but they're still part of the community. They live maybe in Ripon, a couple miles away or a couple miles in another direction. So maybe there's a secondary preference for within a certain geographic range, maybe a certain zip code and such. So, go ahead.
Do you have any preliminary drawings of your layout on this 4-acre project? Any drawings done at all? Any elevations, any plot plans, any of that stuff at all?
So what we have is the concepts that you'll see here, specifically for Escalon. I could show you the more advanced version that Chico has come up with. We are actually starting building permits in Chico so that we can be under construction next year. We are approved in Chico for entitlements. We have $12 million in disaster funding from the state. I just submitted our tax credit application, so now we're starting the building permit process.
Will there be a community center involved in this thing as well?
Yes.
There will be a middle area functional for the seniors.
Yeah, let me go back here just a few more slides. And the question is on the design, how fleshed out we are. Right now in Escalon, although we're taking this from our Chico project, right now in Escalon it's just a concept. Again, we are just strictly talking concepts right now, but this is based on our Chico project. And so you can see the first phase there, it's 24 plexes spread out in a variety of walking paths with the clubhouse and community room right there smack in the middle. Now, one of the suggestions we got today was, as you see the two phases, both of the clubhouses are stuck in the middle, is maybe we adjust that so the two clubhouses are actually right next to each other, and you kind of create a long C of units with the two clubhouses right in the middle so you can do larger events and such. So that's one of the feedback, that's one of the things that we got today from the earlier session. But you can see 24 plexes, 2 in front, 2 in back, everyone's got a porch, all walkways throughout, the clubhouse in the middle, a variety of open space, and then of course you've got the big buffer for the future park expansion from the existing park right there.
Parking.
Yes. Yeah, we're not dialed down that yet on that particular concept, but let's go to the actually let's go this way to the rendering. Right. Okay, so the parking. There'll be, let me see, that's not what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. So there will be a variety of spaces in front of each of the units.
Are they set up for each unit privately, or can they be random parking?
The parking plan will be established in concert with the city and with our residents, depending on how many people have cars and things like that. So that's something that gets fleshed out over time. So right now, and the reason I say that is because the units will have parking in front of the units, but there will also be carports ringing the development, because that's where our solar is going to be coming in, is that it'll be placed on top of the carports, yes.
What about storage for the seniors? Are there going to be additional storage area?
That will be something to be fleshed out during the design period. Right now, as it stands, there's storage in each of the units. The carports will have storage, but not every senior is going to have a carport. So that's something that will have to be fleshed out through design. In our developments, it's barely over 1, slightly less than 2.
1.8, 1.3?
It's usually like 1.5, 1.6. And I say that because as a male, I understand I do not live as long as the females do. I've been to many developments that have been open a long time. A lot of single females end up, because our residents stay in place and they age in place. Like I said, I was telling a story earlier, I've got someone in Colorado Springs who just turned 100. And so we generally end up with just 1 to 2 people in a unit.
What do you figure the average rent will be at the time?
I'm sorry, what was the question
The
again?
average rent be? What is the rent going to be for these seniors?
That is another great question. And so the question is, what is the rent? I'm going to pull that up actually, because we were just discussing that in our 4 p.m. meeting. I had pulled up what the current rent and income calculations are for this area. It's just going to take me one quick moment to bring it back. All right, we're not launching right now, but I can tell you what I was illustrating earlier today is that at 30% AMI, which is 30% of the area median income, a household of 2, that is capped at something like $19,000 a year. So how you extrapolate what they're going to pay in rent is that they're going to pay 30% of their income. So if somebody makes the max, or a couple makes the max of $19,600, the 30% area median income, they're going to pay 30% of their rent, which is roughly $6,000 a year, which is roughly $400 to $500 a month. And then that goes up depending on their area median, on their income. So if they're at 50% area median income, that could be something like $600 or $700 a month.
What about utilities? Are they factored in?
Yeah, so the utilities, they'll get a utility allowance, and that usually covers most of their utilities. And we usually pay for some of the extra stuff like water and trash and stuff.
And then what about maintenance over the years?
So another great question. So the question is, how do we handle maintenance and asset management and such? So that's all part of the math problem that I solve up front, is how much sources I get, what my income is going to be every year, and how much reserve do I need at the start to make sure that my project lasts at least 15 years. And the reason why I say 15 years is because typically when you do a tax credit project, you're looking at the first 15-year lifespan before you refinance again, because your tax credits last 15 years. So once that 15 years is up, then it's time for the major rehab and to restart the tax credits for another 15 years. We also start with an affordability covenant, usually of 55 years. So I'm looking at a 55-year affordability covenant time period where I'm going to refinance at least 3 times. So I am planning every 15-year increment. In Chico, for instance, Chico is going to have far higher operational costs than most of our new developments have, because we're including a van service with it. We're also, insurance costs are higher because there's multiple buildings. So Chico has a higher operational cost right from the start. So when I plan my 15 years out until I refinance Chico, we're starting with a larger reserve so that every year, if I lose money on operations, I pull from that reserve to keep everything going for 15 years.
Do you have your own maintenance company, or do you sub that stuff out?
Everything, we are a fully integrated company, except, I'm sorry, the question was, who are employees on site, who do we third party out? CCH is a fully integrated company except for the GC part. We hire local GCs to construct our projects. Property management, maintenance, service coordinator, community managers, all are CCH employees. We have 300 plus employees in our company, and 90% of them are on the operations side.
Those be on site?
Yes. So we usually plan to have at least the community manager or the assistant community manager on site. And then we have, of course, maintenance and the service coordinator. They will not live on site, but they will be in the office Monday through Friday, sometimes weekends.
Yeah. How do the rents increase? How often does that happen? How does that happen?
That is a great question. So the question is, how often do rents increase? And there's a couple different answers to that question. The first is your funders. Sometimes your funders have rent increases. Sometimes they don't allow rent increases. I actually just got a message that HUD today announced their rent increases on HUD units this year, and it's only 5.9% on HUD units this year for rent increases. Now, we don't always take that 5.9% because depending on the communities that we're in, the communities cannot absorb the 5.9% or whatever increase it is. So if I'm in a community like Chico, for instance, or Redding, those communities cannot absorb rent increases every year. So we don't factor in rent increases, or we factor in much smaller rent increases like 2 to 3%, so that I can make the developments last 15 years. So all those factors are factored in at the beginning when we're solving the math problem to make that sustainable for 15 years.
Are you able to negotiate with PG&E or anything?
That's again, and the question is on utilities, are we able to negotiate lower rates? So the utilities generally have lower rates for lower income residents, and our service coordinators work with the residents to make sure that they can access those. Because we will have a solar program on site that will actually help us mitigate our common area costs and such. So there are enough incentives and there are enough programs that we can, one, make sure that our residents pay almost zero on their utilities, and two, that our development is not hurt by any utility costs or anything like that, too.
Would you have recreation areas for the seniors?
Yeah, so actually let me go back. The question is recreation areas for the city. I'm going to, for the development. So as you see in the middle there, we'll have the nice large clubhouse. The grassy area will be programmed basically with feedback from the community, with the feedback from the city. Some of the things that we like to have are community gardens. Sometimes we do a dog run. We always have seating areas, barbecue areas. We like to design, especially in the newer developments, the clubhouse as kind of an indoor-outdoor design so that we can do large gatherings both inside and outside and kind of take advantage of the nice weather in most of the areas that we're in, especially in California. Now, the amenity space, I'll just finish this question here. The amenity space inside, again, is based on the community and the feedback that we get from the residents. So some communities like to have a fitness room along with, the large community space. Some of our communities are telling us, get rid of the fitness space. What we'd rather have is kind of a card area, reading area, game area. We'd rather have that instead of the fitness area. Some of our communities are telling us they're not even using the computer stations now because everybody's got a phone or an iPad or something. So get rid of the computer room and use that as a fitness room or a game room or whatever. So we take all the feedback from our residents and we design the programs accordingly.
There'll be a time where refinance and say, okay, rid of the senior housing portion.
That's a great question. So the question is, will this ever not be a senior project? And there's a couple different answers to that. The first answer is that we've only been doing seniors for 61 years, and it's absolutely what we prefer. The second part of that answer, as I was stating earlier, there is a 55-year affordability covenant on this, so this will be affordable for at least 55 years. Now, the third answer to that is because we want to keep it senior and we don't want to run afoul of fair housing, we need somewhere in the agreement with the city that this is to be only seniors for the entirety of, we own it, the entirety of the affordability period, that it just stays senior until the end. And the reason why we want that as a developer is because if there is not a prohibition on it just being seniors and such, then anybody can come to us and say, you know what, this isn't classified as a senior, you must rent to us. And we would have to rent to them. So we want the city to tell us it's seniors only. We want our funders to tell us it's seniors only because that's all we want to do is just seniors. So, and when I get to that 15-year period and we refinance, we will refinance it as a senior project because of the covenant, because the affordability covenant and the covenant that it's only going to be seniors.
Mentioned you were going to do a market survey as far as that breakdown to ages. What I'm wondering is if there's retirement age 67 and above, those or would you keep going?
I wish it wasn't peak earning years. I wish I could retire right now.
You're making more than you did 10 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
It's going to be look at the demographics. You can see exactly if the need is greater.
That's a great question. So the question is, how are we going to do the market study to verify and codify the demand? And we actually look at it in a couple different ways. The first way we're going to look at it is affordability from the standpoint of income, right? So we want to know how much demand is there at all of the variety of incomes, from the extremely low income of 30% area median income, which is the person who's making, or the couple who are making $19,000 a year, all the way up to the 80% AMI, which is a couple, two people who are making, in this area, $55,000 a year. So we're going to be looking at all that income spread and the age spread only from the standpoint of 55 and 62, right? I want to see, you know, what that demand is at 55, because you're right, if everyone in this area at 55 is working and they're making too much money for this development, then what's the point of going down to 55? I might as well keep it at 62. And the feedback that we've gotten is that you don't want just a extremely low income senior development. You would like to have a mixed income development that runs the gamut from, again, people who are on Social Security, all the way up to people who might have a decent teacher's pension or a decent government pension. You know, again, the couple is bringing home $50,000 a year. That's, for this area, considered 80% area median income for a couple. So we're going to be looking at the market study through the gamut. Sure. And that is a great question. And the question is, I own a home right now, I sell the home, can I live in your community? And the answer to that question is, it depends. And it depends on how much money that home is going to end up in your savings account, because income is calculated not just on a pension or if you're still working, but also how many assets you have and how much you could presumably make on that. So if somebody, let's say, has $1 million in the bank and they want to come to our community, we're going to look at that $1 million and say, okay, you're probably making $40,000, $50,000 on that right now. So that's going to be added to your income. So we're going to look at that, the Social Security, pension, whatever, to calculate what your income is. So your asset will not automatically disqualify you, but we will take a certain percentage of that, calculate it as an income, and add that to your income.
That at the 30% of the total income?
So let's say you have a couple $100,000 because you just sold a house. We would look at that at probably, and it changes, the regulation changes every year. Let's call it 5% because of the higher inflation right now. So you've got $200,000 in the bank at 5%, we'll add $10,000 to your income. So you have Social Security, you're taking home $20,000, $25,000 Social Security, but you've got $200,000 in the bank. We're going to bump up your income a little bit because of what you have in the bank, yes.
So how does that equate to what you charge?
Another great question. So you've got $25,000 that you're getting from pension or Social Security. You've got assets that calculate to another $5,000. I'll call it $5,000 to make it easier because it's late and I've got to do this math in my head, right? So you've got $25,000. You're making $5,000 off your assets. That's $30,000 a year. We would then calculate that 30% off that $30,000. So now, instead of $25,000 a year, 30%, which would be $750, we're going to calculate it at $30,000 a year. 30% would be $900. Your rent would be $900. And then that would, so here's where it really gets interesting, is that each of the units will be set aside for different AMIs, right? So let's say your $25,000 a year qualifies you for 40% unit. If you have these assets that now push you to $30,000, you may now qualify for a 50% AMI unit. So you may be bumped up to a different unit. That's a great question.
There's a path there.
Yeah.
Other senior housing, there's subsidized housing, there's certain requirements as far as driver's license, no felony records. Same apply here to you.
Same thing. We run our own property management. We have very strict guidelines, so we follow the same. As long as it meets fair housing requirements, we follow all those rules. Yeah, that's right. We never finished that, but I know there was a question in the back. Do you want me to answer it? No? Okay. So here is the proposed lottery that I've done in the past with several cities, and I'm giving here an example of San Francisco. So we have an 80-unit. I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah.
Maybe you should do it. What page was it on?
There you go.
There we go.
Sorry about
Don't
that.
touch? No.
Okay.
So we have an 80-unit development, right? And so we take the first 100 applications. Oh, once it enlarged just a little bit more.
More?
So we have an 80-unit development. Let's say 300 people apply, right? Now we're going to take, we'll just call it 100. Again, I'm just going to use round numbers here. We're going to take 100 out of those 300 into a lottery. And so I pull out of a hat 100 people out of the 300 who applied. Now, from those 100 that I pulled out of a hat, and again, I pulled it out of a hat, no, I don't know these 100, I just pull these 100 out of the 300 out of a hat. Then I go to the city preferences. And so what are the city preferences? Let's say they are, the first preference is live and work in the city of Escalon. So everyone in that lottery who fits preference list A, they get first chance at a unit. Whatever preference B is, let's say it's veterans, or let's say it's people who live within 10 miles now, because they could presumably have lived in Escalon before. Preference B now, so after preference A, a few people get on preference A, few people get on preference B, and whoever's left in the lottery, they have to wait. So I've got 100 people, we pulled them from the lottery, have no idea who they are. There are 10 people, 15, 20 people who meet preference list A. They get first shot at being underwritten and going for a unit. Now, they are not guaranteed a unit. They still have to go through the underwriting, right? They still have to go through their background checks. You know, did they bounce checks at another development? What is their work history, or not work history, but just what is their credit history, things like that. So they're not guaranteed a unit, but they get first chance at a unit. Once everyone who meets preference list now has a unit, then we move on to whatever list B is, and so on and so on. That's how you do it and still meet fair housing laws.
For example, there are people that entered the lottery for 100 potential spaces, and 150 of those folks were from this general area, the other 150 were.
Yes.
It is still statistically possible to not a single resident from our town.
That is absolutely correct. I cannot guarantee that all 80 units or any of the 80 units will be filled by anybody from the city of Escalon. You're absolutely right. Because the one thing that I have to do to make it meet fair housing is I have to do that lottery. So 300 people apply, 100 people get pulled from a lottery, whichever pulled out. But by doing this preference, you at least can guarantee that the people in Escalon and surrounding communities will have first preference coming off the lottery. That's the best that we can do.
In your other projects, do you have lotteries in those as well?
Yeah, we usually,
How's that turned out in the past? In
people,
terms of those locals being subject to the first.
people are just happy to get a unit. I've been on a project that had 80 units with 6,000 applicants.
My question was,
Go ahead.
other people in that community,
Yeah.
your other projects, what percentage was able to get on because of the?
That's a great question that I do not have the answer to. I'll do some research for you and I'll get that answer for you.
I think that was his question.
Okay, yeah. And the question was, based on a lottery system like that, what is the percentage of people from the town that actually will get a unit? I will have to look that up. I don't know what the answer is for that.
I know there's some large towns in this. And like you said, 1,000 applications.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the best that can be done with fair housing laws. You can't limit potential residents from an area, but what you can do is give them preference in that kind of lottery system. So this is the best system that you can use in order to at least give that preference. So let us take that 6,000 unit, that 6,000 application example. So I get 6,000 applicants, 80 units, I pull 200, 300 for a lottery. Anyone from Escalon is still going to be at the top of the list. So maybe not all 80 of those units are going to be filled with people from Escalon, but I'm certainly going to get a few people from Escalon, at least on that first pass on it. If the statistics will tell you that it's statistically improbable, but yes, it is possible. So it is improbable that that would happen, but it's not impossible. Yeah, fair housing doesn't really care about what funding source.
The using heritage houses
They'll have to apply. We can't pull people from someone else's list, so everybody will have to apply right from the start.
Well, I mean, it's in a community, it's already going through HUD to get on their list. That's not valid for your.
Yeah, the rules say I can't pull a waiting list from somebody else, although we will certainly encourage everyone who is on that waiting list to come to our development. we will blanket the city of Escalon when that happens, for sure. So there, that would be the idea, is to work with all the local organizations within Escalon to make sure that every single senior who is eligible for that development will have the information to apply. Newspapers, newsletters, Facebook, will come to city council. We will. I could, depending on what the market study tells me, I will advertise within that range where I think I'm going to get 80 people from. Yes.
No requirements? As far as where you can, where you have to. In lines, if you only advertise in Escalon, we have enough residents to fill your facility.
We will.
Keep it out of the Stockton record and Manteca facilities. If we advertise here, what you're talking about, are you required to go outside of the boundaries of Escalon to advertise?
I'm going to have to defer that. So the question is, where do I have to advertise at? And I do not know. I suspect the answer, but I want to research that answer first before I answer. I don't want to speak out of turn.
When we're working with housing, exactly.
Yeah, just to round off, yes. Yes, that's it, exactly. Depends on the funding source. So certain funding sources do not have prevailing wage requirements. Some sources do. So right now at this particular time, if we do a larger project and it's 4% tax credits, we are not required to pay prevailing wage. There are other funding sources though. For instance, if we get vouchers, project-based vouchers, those project-based vouchers come with HUD requirements, which means that we have to pay Davis-Bacon, which is the federal prevailing wage, not the state prevailing wage.
Was the city charging fees for all the construction and stuff, is that all gonna be part of the deal, or
Oh, well, that's part of our negotiation with the city council is how many fees we get to pay and cost of the land, all the other requirements. So that's all part of that negotiation and that back and forth.
Revenue deferrals.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions? I think you've covered most of what I was going to present in terms of design, the lottery, things like that. Any other questions?
the city, how can you take land that's recreational and move into housing? I thought that was set up. Talked about this in the past. Normally speaking, when land is set aside for certain things,
We'll have to go back to the master plan and have that adjusted. I would have to talk to legal about whether or not it can't be done. I haven't been told throughout this whole process that it can't be done. It's just whatever money that is collected on the sale would have to go into that fund that it's reconciled for. So if we were to, it's my understanding, if we were to sell the land to CCH, we would have to take that money and put it into the Parks and Recreation Fund. Yeah. But as far as, it's outside of city limits, and so we have it marked as a plan, but it's not technically in city limits, so it's not zoned. But we do have a master plan filed on it from 2016 that we would have to go back and amend. So that would be a process that we would process at the same time if this was to move forward.
Well, the land was bought with money from that.
Yes, and that's why if it was sold, we'd have to put it back into the rec fund. Yeah.
All right. The desire for the community is to be able to house community soon. Concerned that need opportunities at funding that would allow us to put residents on a higher priority. Have we exhausted all options as far as financing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The question is, are there other avenues to meet fair housing requirements but still give City of Escalon residents, guarantee almost that you house them first before you house anyone else? And I'll just be honest and transparent. To meet fair housing requirements, the lottery system that I have is the best way to do it. And it's the only way that will keep some potential developer from being sued for not meeting fair housing requirements.
Referring to your example earlier, 1.5 occupants per unit, in both phases, that would potentially put 240 residents. With that number in other areas where you maybe what have been the average number of applicants
That's a great question. And so the question is, what have we seen on large developments like this in terms of the number of applicants and such? And I would tell you that it really depends. Again, I'm always saying depends. It depends on the area, and it depends on how fast we build this. So my market study may come out and say there's only a demand for 40, 50, 60 low-income seniors. So all of a sudden, my two-phased approach becomes a one-phased approach with 60 units, and that's what I would pitch to the city, and then the city will come to me and say whether or not that's doable, enough, whatever. So that's part of the give and take. The market study may come back and say that there's hundreds of units that we could potentially fill. So then that changes the dynamics of what I pitch to the city and how quickly we do it. So the market demand is really going to decide how big of an application pool I have for that particular development.
Maybe I can ask my question.
Sure.
On average, what would be the amount of applicants per unit?
Yeah, so.
To get an idea of how many people you would estimate applying for.
So for our Hayward project, which is going to be under construction in September, it's an 80-unit development because it's next to a BART and in a city that doesn't have as much senior affordable. We expect for those 80 units, we'll probably have 400, 500 applicants. For Chico, which this is based on and should be under construction next year, for those 80 units, we probably expect maybe 200, 250. Same for our Reading project, which is going to be under construction next month. That's a 60-unit development. We expect, because we've got 3 other developments in the area and we know our waiting list, we expect probably 200, 250 applicants from that immediate area.
For this one in Escalon, you would quiz the town itself? That's who you do your demographics on the city or the whole area?
For the market study, I will talk to my market study consultant and get an idea of how far out I should go to get an accurate market study count. Because I'm hearing that a lot of people have left Escalon because there's no housing. And so that demographic of what the local area could really mean, maybe it's not Escalon, maybe it's 3 to 5 miles out now. So that's what we have to kind of calculate.
You have some 2-bedroom units, and grandma is on the lease. And so grandma has a 2-bedroom unit. Next thing you know, grandma is bringing in this 2-bedroom unit now has 6 or 7 occupants. does CCH police that?
So we place that in a couple different ways. So the first way would be that if the daughter came to live in the development, the question is going to be, is she a caregiver of the grandma? And is she a registered caregiver with the state? And if she's not, then daughter can't live there because she's not 62 or they're not married or, you know, that kind of capacity. So first of all, the daughter wouldn't be eligible to live there. Nonetheless, the 4 or 5 kids that may be coming with her as well. So that would be nipped in the bud super quick. We also have, with a variety of funding sources and our own compliance team, checking every 6 months, 12 months. So if somebody did slip through the cracks, we would find them, because those extra people would, one, make grandma suddenly over income qualified for that unit. And so she would be terminated almost immediately if that's the case. Or she would be told that all the extra occupants have to go. Otherwise, she would be considered, again, over income, not eligible for the unit. They would all have to leave. So either the occupancy, the age, the multiple incomes in one household, all of that would end that pretty quickly.
About your property management?
No. And so the question is, do we sub out our property management? And again, we are a fully integrated company except for the GC part. So property management, service coordination, development, finance, all of us are in-house. So we are a 300+ employee firm, and most of that is operations. And that's community managers, assistant community managers, maintenance, regional managers, and service coordinators. No, there is no subleasing. That is part of the lease. Again, and I've been in situations where people have put their properties on Airbnb. They were promptly given a 3-day notice and told to vacate immediately. Yes, there's no subleasing, no renting out. We do have compliance checks. We check all of that, so. No, within reason, right? So we do have pet policies. We do allow pets. They have to pay an extra deposit. You know, we're not going to have somebody who's going to have 10 dogs in their unit, of course, but they can bring in, you know, 1 or 2 pets. Yeah. No smoking. There's no smoking, though. So it's always no smoking properties. Any other feedback? I mean, I know besides the City of Escalon resident question, I know you guys really want me to say something else there, but other than that, is there anything else that you guys want to say, or, you know, any feedback from me? You know, again, the lottery's the best that we can do. I'm going to get with you on the advertisement question on that and see what HUD's requirements are, or the state's requirements, because again, there may not be HUD funding on this. It may just be a state-funded venture, so I'll have to see how far out my advertising has to go, so.
Did you ever get anything on subleasing?
Oh, yeah, so he's asking the question on subleasing. Yeah, there's no subleasing at all, and yeah, we've caught many people trying to do that. Airbnb, Craigslist, they're always caught, yeah.
Question, after the first lottery, you fill your 80 units or 100 units, example. Fill all the units, you're now left with 300-400 extra folks that still want to get in. How do you reprioritize our Escalon residents that are still left on the waiting list? Is there a process there? Or do you do another lottery again, or do you rank them all after the fact and all of a sudden Escalon goes to the top for the next level of replacements as folks come and go?
That's an absolutely great question. And so the question is, what happens after the initial lottery, right? So you fill, so I pull, let's say, 300 people off the application list. We do a lottery. We fill up the 80 units. So whoever's left on that waiting list for that date. So let's say it's May 1st, 2025, right? I've got this pool of applicants that go on the waiting list, right? And they're all dated May 1st, 2025. They all get ranked by your preference. So everybody with the same date then all of a sudden goes into your preference pool. So all your City of Escalon residents are at the top of that date pool. So I've got, let's say, 200 people who have May 1st, 2025 as their date. As that list gets winnowed down, at the top, City of Escalon people. When all that gets eliminated, then we go to your B preference and then the rest of the list. When that initial wait list is all exhausted or we're down to just a few people left, then we start the process all over again and again with the ranking and everything. So, yeah, that's a great question. So the timelines of this development, I'm going to give you best case scenario. Do not hold me to this, but this is best case scenario. So we go through the community engagement process right now, right? And let's say this takes a few more months. I've come out here. This is my second time. We have more meetings. All of a sudden, we come to a decision on whether or not you like this concept. Let's say the community likes this concept. Then we go to City Council and we hammer out the initial agreement. That's not the final agreement, that's the initial agreement, so that I can go through entitlements and then go through my financing. My hope is that we get through that initial agreement and the initial entitlements so that I can go for next year's financing rounds, which generally start around this time. So my hope is a year from now, I'm going for financing. Then the next step after that is we finalize the final agreement with the city along with getting our building permits, and then we're under construction. So best case scenario timeline for me is beginning 2025, around the same time right now, we're under construction. That's best case scenario. And that all depends that there's no hiccups in the community engagement process, there's no hiccups in the entitlements, there's no hiccups with the environment on the site, there's no hiccups with the financing, there's no hiccups in the final round of building permits and hammering out that final agreement with the city before we're under construction. And again, if we go through this community engagement process and the town is like, no, we want to think of something else, then that's okay too. So, I'm out here completely honest and transparent. I'll meet with you as many times as you want, and then we will get to the final of these community engagement, and you guys will let me know, yes, this sounds great, or no, it doesn't sound great. And, we're here to create the best product for the city of Escalon that makes sense for the community. Another example I'll give you is in the city of Brentwood right now. We are taking over a project from another developer who did this exact process in a way that I do not recommend. It was done in a way in such that they ended up with a Facebook page. You can actually go on the web and there's a Facebook page against that one project, right? And there's like hundreds of members of this Facebook page, and that's because they did their community engagement in a way that was top down. We're gonna build this. This is how it's gonna be. I will take your feedback. I don't really care, but we're gonna do it this way. CCH does it the opposite. So it's a bottom-up approach. I'm taking all of your feedback. I will then tell you what I can do, and then you will give me a response. Yes, that works for us. No, it doesn't. And that's it. So I'm happy that, today I think we've talked to 70, 80 residents right now of Escalon. I talked to, the first time I was here, maybe another dozen, 20. So I love this community engagement. I love this community support. This is the type of community we want to build in because you guys are so passionate about your community. So however this goes, I want to just thank you guys for coming out here. So thank you. All right. And I wish that your restaurants were not closed on Monday, because I was going to go out to eat, but I think most of them are closed, other than the Happy Garden. I went to the Happy Garden last time I was here. It's very good, by the way, but yeah, great sushi.
So we're going to go ahead and take about a 5 to 10 minute break so we can set up for council. So we'll go ahead and shut everything off and do that and come back.